Right. Hello there, healthcare humans. Thank you so much for coming back for another episode of The Other Human in the Room. I'm super excited to have another healthcare human conversation, this time with someone I can't believe we've actually only met this year. I feel like I've known you longer than that, but um, the person we're speaking with today is someone that I've stumbled across in some of my teaching roles, and have just found a kindred spirit and someone who loves talking about how we can be more human in healthcare. And so I'm super excited to have a conversation. So why don't you introduce yourself, Caroline?
Hi, everybody. I'm Caroline Bowman. I am a family doctor. I live in Collingwood. Um, I have two kids. I am also married to a family doctor. And maybe I'll leave it at that for now.
I love it. Well, I think one of the things that connected us, like both of us are involved in a portion of family medicine residency that's about kind of, I don't know, retaining your humanity through medicine. And that's one of the things that we really connected on. So I would just love, maybe as a first question, like, how's it going for you? How's it going for you being a human in healthcare? How's the last while been? And how are you feeling these days?
Well, let's just start with a nice big question. um, so I guess maybe to share a little bit more about where I'm at. I graduated from McMaster Family Medicine in 2005. Started a family practice in Wasaga Beach with my husband and another one of our best friends in 2006, and then practiced family medicine um, in my practice, and basically until last fall. I had a planned sabbatical last September, which ended up being a medical leave. I guess to take you back a bit more, I was diagnosed with MS in 2017, and um, that definitely, has impacted my life pretty significantly. My main symptoms after my initial diagnosis, I presented with numbness on the left side of my body, but that cleared up with steroids. And then the main kind of life changing symptom has been fatigue since then. So between 2017 and September of last year, basically just kind of was gradually like picking apart different parts of my work life to try to find a balance. So I stopped doing hospital work. I gave up leadership roles, got some extra NP time. Had a little period of time where I had a family medicine colleague kind of doing a day a week in the office. So just tried a whole bunch of different, like picking off different parts from work to see if the balance would feel right, and realized probably fall of 2021 that I actually needed like a bit of a chunk of time off to just sit back and say like, okay, what's like the speed and the pace, just I couldn't quite get it right, but I couldn't really figure out what to do. So plan this sabbatical for myself, which was, I had lots of visions of like hiking every day by myself and reading like, I don't know, 30 books, and but ended up having another relapse that started like, I feel like it was like a week before my locum began. And it was a weird relapse. So it started with just numbness in my feet and increased fatigue, and then kind of grumbled along through September and October, and then just kind of exploded into I was having challenges with my bladder. I was not able to walk. So then, and then it wasn't responding to steroids, and it was a bit of a weird relapse. So I had two hospitalizations at St. Mike's, which is a very old hospital, and it was quite an experience. Very lovely people, very lovely nurses, but and also a few burned out nurses, and but for the most part, lovely people. But yeah, I shared a very small space in both hospitalizations with men, which was just interesting, sharing a bathroom with with old men. But so for work for me, so then I luckily my locum was able to stay. So she stayed from January and was kind of going to stay indefinitely. In about April, so my mobility did return, and but the fatigue has just continued to be more of a challenge even than it was before. So in about April, I had this very clear. I woke up actually with this clarity one day that I needed. It was time to hand over my family practice. So it, I think, had was kind of clear maybe to people around me that that was going to be my next step, but it just I wasn't really ready. Oh my gosh, I'm probably still not ready. I'm like, um,
Mm.
I'm a crier, just as you know.
Me too.
So yeah, so I woke up with that clarity that that's what I had to do. Um, and so then was really lucky to be able to find somebody locum who was covering. She actually got pregnant and was not ready at that point to say she wanted to take over practice. Was able to find another new grad who came and started locuming in September. And he is now officially planning to take over my practice. We're going through all of the faux paperwork stuff and just writing my letter to my patients, which
Mm.
is hard. And so I
Yeah.
haven't announced it yet, but that letter will come out in early January. And so yeah, so I'm in a bit of a, it's a weird place. I'm actually I'm doing a half day a week of locuming for a colleague. So I've got my hand in family medicine, which feels really good. I'm teaching mental health and behavioral science, which is how Joan and I connected, and do that half day a week with family medicine residents, and then doing a leadership job for that, and then also doing a little bit of work through MAC supporting residents who are living with illness and disability. So
Mm.
lots of things that are exciting going on, but it's definitely a different. It's actually a lovely pace, and
Yeah.
happy to be in this pace right now.
Mm. Thank you for sharing all that. There's so many like themes in there that I think even if someone hasn't had your exact lived experience that might resonate, including like one theme that I've heard from others is um seeing your role as a physician, seeing healthcare differently after you have experienced some amount of illness yourself, whether it ends up being chronic or temporary. Sometimes when our bodies let us know that they are there and have different needs for time, it really comes up against the wall of expectations that actually are never possible, even if one is fully able, whatever that means. But there's something about when that gap grows that you do see things differently. Did you find that was true for you as well?
Absolutely, absolutely, and um, I think we've talked about you and I before, like this idea that we really are trained to ignore our bodies. Our training involves us not paying attention to our bodies and pushing through, and we really kind of celebrate that in our culture, the ability to kind of push through all of that stuff. So then having a body that was very clearly saying like you can't keep doing this. It's the pushing through, like that strategy just doesn't, it can still work temporarily, but the consequences are just be, like, got so much higher that it was like, oh, okay, I really, like, that can't be my that
Yeah.
can't be my only mode.
Yeah. I'm wondering, like, that fatigue element, how has your understanding of fatigue changed now that you've had this experience of it? Like, what is your fatigue teaching you and what could it teach us?
I mean, so lots of shame associated with fatigue.
Mm.
And I'm not even sure always if fatigue is the exact right word for it, um, but my brain, especially when I'm tired, just moves slower. Like processing speed is definitely slower. So and I think, yeah, so a lot of shame with that. I think when our brains have been such a part of our identity, and like a brain that moves quickly. And um, and then also, like, again, that pushing through is really such a part of our culture. So you work through your call, like you post call, and you're staying, you get rewarded for being somebody who can say, no, no, I'll stay and see my patient, that patient's important. Or you get rewarded for being like, no, I want to go to the OR, like I really want to see that case, I know I could go sleep, but I don't need to. And so yeah, definitely had to like work through a lot of that shame piece. So Brene Brown's work has been very helpful for me, at least, like, understanding what is shame, what are the ways that we respond when we feel shame. And then recognizing a lot of the judgments I've probably had for other people around fatigue. The way we're taught about things like fibromyalgia or chronic fatigue syndrome. And um, I think there's definitely stigma around fatigue in our training. So really having to practice self-compassion around what it means to have to say no to things because I'm tired.
Yeah.
And then recognizing that I probably, again, I think I've always been a compassionate physician, but um, that I probably didn't understand that nearly as well as I do now.
Hmm. How have you noticed that story evolving? Like recognizing that the shame story, the less than, not enough, whatever kind of language it would have had because brain moving slower, body moving slower, right? Have you come to any different stories or trying on different stories to see what might feel a little less shame filled
Yeah.
around this fatigue? And I mean, the whole journey,
I think, again, like language that you and I both share, like just this idea of common humanity.
Mm,
And it's actually just human.
yeah.
And and really, like, this, everybody will slow down at some point. So even like just aging, it's just aging. And so I'm just happening to, maybe it's happening a little bit differently to me, but like it's very human. And so that helps me. And another thing that's helped me really is like just that widening my identity. Like, again,
Mm,
I don't even think I realized I was never somebody who was super wrapped. I didn't want to, I didn't grow up wanting to be a doctor. I kind of surprised myself by applying for medical school. I applied just to Mac, didn't have an MCAT, and like totally shocked myself by getting in. So it wasn't that I've always had this identity as like, I'm going to be a doctor and that's who I am, but it creeps up on you where it does really become a part of your identity. So I think I've really like picked that apart a little bit, and I think that's been helpful. And really, it's like the human identity piece that has been the most helpful.
that's so, yeah. It's funny how it sneaks up on you, hey? Like even that reaction that came through around saying goodbye to your patients. Like I I mean, I don't know. I don't want to speak for you, like, but what feels difficult about a transition like this? And is it connected to your identity?
So I think the neat part about having been off already for a year, it's, and again, like I didn't mean, it wasn't planned that it was going to be like this. So
Yeah.
it wasn't, this is just how it is. But I do definitely there is an element of distance, and really my identity. Like I've done a lot of that work already since 2017, but a lot in the past year. So I think my sadness is much less at this point about loss of identity, and more about just, I really love my patients. There's a lot of people I really care about.
Yeah.
And I think, like, that's the part that's the sadness. Like, I got to play, we get to play this amazing role in people's lives. It's such a gift, really. And it's burden. It's both those things. But I think it's, yeah, the sadness is the, like, I'm, looking through, and it's like, many of these people I've known for 18 years, and you watch kids grow up, and you watch people like survive things that are really hard, and you're with them through it. And um And so that's the part that's, I think about, you know, how, and I can't say goodbye to everybody. I
Yeah,
went through a piece of that too, where I was like, well, maybe I'll set up and I'll like figure out a way to do like goodbye phone calls. And I was like, I can't do that.
that's a lot of
Can't.
phone calls.
It's not, yeah. I think that was like, I think I would die if I
Yeah,
had to do, 700. No, and there's not 700 people I don't know how
but
many it is
it would
that
be
would,
a lot.
but it would just be, yeah, it's, I can't. So it's just like, I've got to kind of close the book, but
Hmm.
uh, yeah, that's
Hmm.
what's hard.
Yeah. And you sort of wonder, I know you and I have talked, and I've heard you on other podcasts talking about this idea of ableism. So just the notion of that's not just in healthcare, but in society in general, that to be physically and mentally able, like a bit of an invisible standard that I'm not sure who's actually in charge of, but just as able as possible. Let's say that as producing for others as possible is superior to if you are unable to do that, you know? And yeah, as you said, it is human to change in our capacities. So there's something that is just completely is false and inhuman and therefore is often felt as oppressive, right? If someone lives in a body that doesn't meet that invisible standard. Um, and I remember it just learning about that concept and then being like, oh no, like some of what is even kind of just default fundamental assumptions of how we're trained seem a bit ableist to say the least, you know? And I'm wondering what if that's well, I know because of podcasts I listen to you, like that's been a bit of your journey is understanding that concept. I'd love to hear as someone with this kind of lived experience how you see that lens now in how healthcare is set up, you know?
Yeah, and such a good question. I am still really learning about all of this stuff. And I think like at the like core of it is this, yeah, again, this like narrative around productivity, and to be worthy as a human, you need to be productive. And, you know, what does that exactly mean? Um, and then what does that mean if somebody is, not as productive, or if actually they require a lot of help? And on one hand, we think we are, and I think we are, but with the little caveat, like we're very compassionate, and we want to, we're there and supporting our patients. And you can
Yeah.
think of patients who do require a lot of care and a lot of need, and I think we would like to see ourselves as compassionate and supportive. But then what does it mean when we have a really hard time holding space for ourselves when we need help or care, or when we realize we're not able to do all the roles that we used to do, and we like beat ourselves up so much about that. So yeah, I'm really like, I'm still working through all of this, but how do I hold space for myself as a human who, right now actually I'm productive in my house. I'm less productive in the workforce, and I'm, working through that. But I'm also like, I can load the dishwasher, I can unload the dishwasher, I can put clothes in the washing machine. And last year during my relapse, like there was a period of time where I could do nothing.
Mhm.
Um, but I could still walk myself to the bathroom, and I could go to the bathroom on my own, and I could get myself back, using my rollator from the bathroom. And but very aware that, you know, that could change, and like, how would I hold myself still as a worthy human being? And then getting into that meta piece, like, so what does it mean if I can't hold myself as a worthy human being, if I'm not able to do those things? Like, what have I thought about other people who can't do those things? So
Yeah.
anyway,
Mm.
I'm working through all of that. They're big questions.
Oh yeah. And in another conversation we recently had, you talked about living the question. So it's not about having those final answers, right? But yeah, you think about that. So what living that question, what have you found helpful, sort of almost like as anchors? Like what has been, whether it's a daily practice or things that you've kind of been exploring, what has helped you really connect with your humanity and your worthiness, especially in the midst of a time where ability to do much else was taken from you? What have you found to be kind of nourishing in those times?
Um, so you ask really great questions. Um, so I think self-compassion, I think we've talked about this before too. So there's, like um Kristen Neff has a research on this idea of self-compassion, but that's been really helpful for me. And one of the pieces of, so the three pieces, so common humanity, so recognizing that actually, like, this is part of life, this is part of being human. And I think I've actually, after our conversation a few days ago, I've been thinking again, common humanity is really spirituality. It's
Yeah.
just, different
Mm.
language. So I think I'm like tiptoeing into spirituality, but
Mm.
through the doorway of common humanity. And I think that's been really helpful. And then another piece, other two pieces of that, so mindfulness, just trying to really practice like noticing what are the thoughts I'm having, oh wait, oh, I'm having that thought, and sort of like separating out from that a bit. And then the other piece is self-kindness, so just actually practicing using nice words with myself,
Yeah.
and then you can do some sort of self-soothing stuff. So that practice, like that combo of things, has been really helpful. Also, just there's like just so many amazing thinkers and podcasters, and so really, um, Krista Tippett's On Being podcast
Mm.
and Brene Brown's podcast, like all of these amazing people. Your podcast, you walked with me through my weekend of having COVID where I couldn't go to Thanksgiving. So yeah, so I think all of those things have been really helpful for me.
Hmm. I love that. And I love thank you for articulating, right? Those are like the three components of like Kristen Neff's like self-compassion thing. I think that's really helpful, and especially to break it into its components, because it's been not surprising, but I've noticed like having conversations about self-compassion, how sort of saying have self-compassion. I mean, probably for many, many folks, and definitely those of us who have been socialized into healthcare, it's like it bounces off you. It's like a rubber ball. You're like, but what do you mean? And that doesn't, and you like say you give an example of like being kind to yourself, and it's like, no. Like it's so I don't know if you've noticed that whether in yourself or with colleagues, like what has happened to us that makes it so hard to consider being kind to ourselves, considering ourselves a part of the common humanity. The
Yeah.
mindfulness one, even though that one seems most obvious in the sense of because we're constantly distracted and overloaded. But I'm curious your thoughts about that. Like what's going on in healthcare that we end up in this place where we struggle so much with self-compassion?
Yeah, well, Kristen Neff talks about like some of the common misconceptions about self-compassion, and I think one of them is this idea that if you are kind to yourself, you're gonna stop pushing, and
Yes.
you're gonna be less productive. So I think that probably is a big one with physicians. Is this like maybe you'll become complacent, and maybe that like maybe you've always motivated yourself with that, you know
Yeah.
more like you got to get it done, or you're not doing enough. Maybe that's always been part of your way of motivating yourself, and maybe that has served you too. So like maybe there's that reality too, like maybe there's been some places where it has served you, so it's harder to think about leaving that.
Mm.
um,
Mhm.
I also think, like, I don't have this figured out, but I feel like medicine separates us in a way, like from common humanity. Our identity as physicians, like
Yeah.
it there's I don't and again, I don't know, I'm not sure exactly where I picked all that stuff up, but but I think it's really, yeah, part of that hidden curriculum that we do start to see ourselves as sort of separate from common humanity. So that's a little bit of a barrier, I think, to self compassion as well.
Oh yeah. I've thought on and off about how, you know, having a bit of social anxiety my whole life, not debilitating or diagnosed, but just maybe all humans have this. You're around other humans and you're like, what do they think of me? Ah, I don't know what to do with my words or my hands, like that sort of self-consciousness in crowds, and how one way I have personally coped with that is finding a defined role. So, like in childhood, some of that was formed around religion and having a specific objective in all social interactions of evangelizing my friends, to be honest. And then later, yeah, like I know who to be if I'm in a room with a patient, and I don't have to be all the messy things that I am, because good grief, it's so embarrassing, and I'm so all the things. I'm just this physician, and I have this frame, and even the discomfort when someone calls me my first name and I'm like, should I correct them? Like a patient does, I mean, um, like the agitation of like, oh, you're calling me who I really am. I'd rather be just Dr. Chan. I think you're onto something there. And at least part of it could be kind of what we
Yeah.
think is self-protective or think is necessary, as a bit of armor, maybe, to use Brené's
Yeah.
language.
Yeah, that like I think you described that so well that you're right. Like again, it's in some ways protective, and when you can be in that role, it maybe feels like less messy, and you can, and then we get really good at kind of playing that role of like being somebody who's together and you know who can help other people solve their problems and can
Yeah.
say yes to like, sure, I will step in and do this. And I think the time that really started to like cause friction for me was actually before I got MS. It was when my kids were little.
Mm-hmm.
And that was my first, like, I guess I didn't call it burnout at the time because I don't think I really even knew what that was. But that was my first um, realization where I was like, I can't do all these roles. And I think actually motherhood comes with its own set of like, you know,
Oh, yeah.
very difficult to achieve, actually impossible to
Yeah, I was
achieve
like, impossible is.
role. So I think I was trying to, and I'm like, I also don't even see myself as a perfectionist. I think probably I am in these certain elements, but like I'm pretty good at letting a lot of stuff go.
Yeah.
But I wasn't able to like at that stage. I was not. I couldn't. I couldn't let enough stuff go from either to feel like I was holding it well enough. So
Yeah. It's funny. Like literally right now I'm considering, maybe I've had this thought before, but it left me. But like for a while now, I've really thought about how imposter syndrome, we say it as if it's an individual thing that people have or don't, but it's really a reflection on the society. And that's like how it's presenting in a personalized way. For sure, perfectionist is the same way. Like, I don't know. I know there's different schools of thought. Some people think it is sort of a personality thing, and people may be more prone to thinking in that black and white way. But I mean, we live in a perfectionist society for sure, right?
mm,
And
mhm.
so I'm just thinking it's kind of funny how it's like, um, some people identify as perfectionist or not, but really, I don't think any of us have escaped
Yes.
it.
I think that's exactly true. Like it's impossible probably to escape it in a society where that's, and again, medical culture, like
Ugh,
there's, it demands perfection in many ways. And
yeah.
I know you and I have chatted about that too. Like what is good enough
Hmm.
in medicine, and like where are the places you can be good enough, and where are the places where you can be like not very good and that's okay, and where are the places where you have to be like excellent,
Hmm.
or perfect, and it's really
Ongoing
hard.
process, right? I'm curious, like, so you see patients a day a week, you said?
Half day.
Yeah, lovely. And they're not your patients, and you get to practice medicine.
Yeah.
How does that feel different? What do you give yourself permission to do certain things you wouldn't otherwise? Like, what are you discovering about a way to practice medicine through being in that space?
Well, that's a good question too. So I'm really lucky. I'm covering for a colleague who I really like him. I really like the way he practices.
Yeah.
I'm coming into a place where I know people will have good follow up. He is not like he's not expecting very much of me at all. So I can go. I go there. I see patients. I write good notes. Um, but I'm not doing labs and messages. Like
Oof.
I'm copying everything to him. I'm not carrying around that burden of, all of the follow-up stuff, which is like really amazing. I'm also
Yeah.
not doing office management. So I'm not hiring staff. I'm not, like the millions of lists of things that go along with running a practice. I'm not trying to figure out how I get everyone their flu shot.
Yes.
I'm not doing searches to make sure everybody's up on their pap test. So it really is like it's a very small. I'm doing a small part of the role, but it's still something, and I'm still connecting with people, and I'm still providing access, and I still get to use my family medicine brain, and I still am like I did, still means I have to remember COPD, and I have to
Yeah.
remember, you know, narcotics, and like all like things that I don't want to forget quite yet. So
Yeah.
it's good.
You know, it's funny. I really think when when many patients, not all, but like when the public thinks of the work we do, they probably are exclusively picturing what you are doing,
Yeah.
like as the job you have. And I think even that's internalized in us where I I know many say judge themselves if they're not seeing patients Monday to Friday 9 to 5 as those are the hours that count as work when
Yes.
you've just described a multitude of other roles that take time and energy that are also expected roles.
Yes.
And we think we can, then we feel guilty if we don't, we're part time because we only see patients, blah, blah, half days a week. And you're just like, the whole role, the whole job is more than that.
It's so I know. And I didn't like that was something I didn't even realize until I don't know. It was like pretty far in my career where I'd be like, "Oh my gosh, I feel guilty. I have this day off." And I was like, "What did I do on my day off?" Well, I like developed policies for the office. I ordered supplies. I like I did evals for my staff. I'm like, "That's not a day off.
That's work.
That's work." Or you also, you like I went to this meeting for this hospital committee, and then
Yep.
I did you're like also work. Like I know it's not getting paid. It's not what I would choose to do for fun.
So
Um,
that it doesn't get to count as off, right? That's
but
gotta be work.
it took me a long time. Like I've always had a smaller practice. I started when we started our practice. I knew I was hoping to get pregnant within 2 years. So I started with the smaller practice, knowing that like I think I've always had around 900. Um, and I had other things that were easier to leave. I did a merge, which I hated, and left that. Did some extra walk-in clinic shifts, which were easy to just stop doing, and then um, so I've always kind of structured so that I didn't have to be seeing my family practice patients in the office 3 days a week. Um, but it took me a long time to realize like I was we were set up so people have access for fit-ins and and then it was actually a lot of work that goes in outside of that time to make all of that happen.
Ah,
And actually, as I'm talking through this too, like another big piece of shame that I've had to work through, like our community, we've undergone, the changes that a lot of small communities have, where our hospital was all, family doctor run. Family doctors took care of their inpatients every day, and we moved over to a hospitalist program. And I was one of the first people who handed over to the hospitalist program. That was my initial, you know, with the kids being little and having to give something, and had a ton of shame about that because I think our community really valued that as part of our identity.
mhm.
Um, and I actually now forget what I was where I was going with that, but um,
I'm just
I don't know.
recognizing
I just
all
lost it.
like all the roles we play, right? And that they
Oh,
all
well,
count, even if they're not all even remunerated extra. Yeah.
And I remember what I was going to say. So then there was a period of time where people would talk about like valid reasons why people would stop doing hospital.
Oh
And
boy.
it would be like, and like, and these are like really nice, well-meaning people, but it was always like, well, if you're doing this other work, that's an okay reason not to. If you're doing this other work, that's an okay reason not to. But like, nobody, at this point, I actually did have MS, and I was like, nobody is saying, if you're living with chronic disease, that's an okay reason, or if you're raising toddlers, that's an okay reason, or what if you just want to learn violin, like,
Yeah. What if you just don't
we
want
had
to?
there was definitely a hierarchy of like what were the legitimate reasons why you could spend your time doing something outside of the office, and it felt very shaming.
Yeah. I think even what you've just named is like super important because like sometimes like even maybe the way I talk about it where it's like the shame-based culture and like it's easy to picture there's like dark figures in the corner that are maliciously doing it, but actually like it's all there are some people that maybe have problematic centers, but we're all good inside, somewhere deep inside. And there's some that are more malicious or virulent, but actually, for the most part, kind, nice, well meaning, perpetuators of shame. Like all of those exist, including me, I am sure. I'm sure yesterday, and I didn't even know it. Like that we have these ideas, and yeah, when we think this is valid, that's not valid. When we create hierarchies, what like all of that just inevitably leads to shame, even if we think it's us being well-meaning or us being good. It's so interesting
Yeah.
it's our neighbors and it's us, right? It's actually all of us that are perhaps unconsciously, mostly unconsciously perpetuating this stuff, eh?
Well, and again, I think it goes back to that idea of self-compassion. Like, because if you're judging yourself on that, if you're saying you're to like, well, I can't step away from this role because my reason is not valid enough. Like, we're gonna end up putting that onto other people too, and
Yes.
it's not, again, not malicious, but um, we've just really internalized a lot of that, like that productivity narrative. I'm valuable if I'm X amount of productive.
Oh yeah. I have found therefore like times where I'm like noticing I have quite a bit of judgment for someone else or resentment or I'm really like kind of focused on someone else and what they're doing and thinking it's wrong or whatever. There's often something in that for me where it's either I'm judging myself the exact same way, but just like, or I actually need a little more of what they're doing. So it's like, oh, that person's so lazy. Okay, now I trace it back and be like, that usually means I need to rest more. That usually means I need to do less. Have you ever found that to be true for you?
Absolutely. And actually, Brene was super helpful. I feel like
Mm,
she helped me with that a lot too. That idea of like that, wait a second, what is it that why am I being so judgmental of you?
yep.
Like, what is it that maybe I need that I'm jealous that you're able to like do for yourself? And why do I feel like I can't? Like, what's going on there?
Yeah. Oh, 100%. Um, I was curious actually, you'd mentioned pace a couple times, and to me that seems like one of the main kind of lessons or components of waxing and waning energy is it's our body inviting us to change our pace because it's like gas tank is low, gas tank is full, right? Like and
Yeah.
I've been talking a lot about um, what happens if we practice medicine according to our capacity. Like, and it's so interesting when I talk to healthcare people, we're all like, how could we do it? I'm not sure. And then when I ask people like outside of medicine, uniformly hear like, I think it's impossible to do it every 15 minutes. Like, which doesn't mean it is or isn't impossible, but it's so interesting. Like inside of medicine, it's like, well, we got to figure this out within these confines. And then when I talk to like embodiment people, they're like, I don't think it's possible every 10 to 15 minutes. I take an hour. And you're like, uh-oh, what do we do with that? So I'm curious. You don't have to have the answer, of course, no such thing, but like, how have you noticed your ability to pace yourself, both in your clinical work or and then also in the rest of your week? Um, and how's that project going? The pacing yourself project.
That's such a great question. And I actually love that. I hadn't really thought. about that, like when you ask people from the outside. And
Yeah.
you're right, because it is like all this stuff that you're expected to be empathic and, you know, patient centered and also get everything done and be on time. And like it is a really big, giant ask to do all of
Yeah.
that stuff. So I guess a couple things that I've done. So before I like actually during the pandemic, our office went to all 20-minute bookings
Mm, nice.
because we realized that we were always running late. And so instead of always running late, we were like, why don't we just start? Let's just go with this. And if it turns out, and then I mean, if you've just got a like UTI or an earache, like we'll sometimes fit those in, and those
Mhm.
are. But basically, for the day booking, you're not arriving, looking at your schedule, being like, oh my gosh, I could have told you right off the bat that there's no way I could do this. It was like, okay, we're just gonna assume that things will take that long, and that actually made a big difference, and I think for all of us in our office. So that wasn't just me.
Yeah.
um and then again, for me, with my like, because the energy level is sort of unpredictable too, I have to build space around things. So if I it's talking I'm taking my daughter to Taylor Swift in London, so like that's going to be a giant use of energy. So I have to be really thoughtful about like, how do I get myself ready before, and how do I build in space afterwards. I've become like a lot kinder to myself about not going to things. So
Yeah.
I was supposed to go to. I'm part of a book club. I really like going, and like half the time I just can't go. And I used to kind of beat myself up about like, I don't want to be a flake. I don't want people to think I'm a flake. But I've gotten better at being like, you know what? It's just not going to work today, and trying and realizing like everyone's going to be fine if I don't go. So and I plan a lot less stuff. So like the
Mm,
piece I'm not as in control of right now are my kids. Their activities are like they have very busy lives. So I I can't control all of that stuff. But for me personally, with social stuff, I'm just a lot more thoughtful
mm,
about. I just say no to more things, and I choose things where I get more one-on-one connection versus like, there's
mm.
a Christmas party for our hospital on Friday, and I was like, that is not how I want to use my energy. That would take way
Yeah.
too much energy, and I will connect individually with the people that I want to at other times.
Mm. I'm like furiously taking notes because I want to. I actually think these are like super. Everyone, take notes with what Caroline just said. So, I mean, a beautiful framing question is like, how do I want to spend my energy?
Mm,
And this may feel more critically true if your body very loudly lets you know their limits, but actually is true for all humans who all have limits to energy. None of us are superhuman or immortal, right? So, and then the specific. So, choosing things with more connection, which for you sounds like it's energizing. So, like choosing based on what it will give you, sort of in exchange for the energy you expend, that just makes so much sense. Planning less, saying no more, scheduling things for the time they take.
mm,
It's
yeah.
such a simple idea that we often forget and are not trained to think about, which is odd, but true, right? Um, and think of the impact of something and take care of yourself pre post that thing, like the Taylor Swift. Like those all just feel so practical and helpful, you know? And then, especially if someone listening's like, but I couldn't because probably about whatever you're going to say next is about other people's expectations, running away from shame, in
Yeah.
some oppressive mindset that no one can actually attain, honestly.
So like, as you're saying all this too, it comes back to this idea that of actually accepting that you can't actually do all the things you want to do.
Yep.
um, which I don't think I understood that so much before, but like, there's going to be lots of things that I want to do and that I'm good at and that I might be able to be helpful for. I might be able to like make better, and I actually can't do them all. It's
Mm,
just not possible. So, but man, that's hard.
yeah.
I think we actually spend a lot of like, I for sure spent a lot of my life like not recognizing that. Um, but
Yeah.
I think that's true for everybody. Like, I don't actually think anybody can do all the things they want to do.
No. All the things they love to do, all the places they might want to go, all the things they think are important to do. We
Mm,
actually just, we're going to definitely do a significant subset
yeah,
for sure.
yeah.
It's its
And
own almost grief process, isn't it?
pardon?
Like a grief process of letting go of that, you know?
Yes, it is. It is. And I think it's like I definitely watch like I watch some of my really great friends who I'm like, I don't think you understand that yet.
Yeah. A lot of people are trying.
And I think it's partly when you can get away on not much sleep.
Mm,
So I think it's, you can take out the sleep part and then add more in. And I think some people can that works for them for a while. I don't think that works for anyone forever though.
nope. One of the most helpful phrases I heard, I think it was in CPSO dialect or so. It was in a medical journal and it was an article about ableism a few years ago. And someone in there was talking about how we're all temporarily abled.
Yeah. Temporarily able-bodied. Yeah.
Yeah, is that sort of a common term that is used, I think.
I
Or
read it for the first time in that same article.
so maybe
It
it was just this, yeah. It was like
stayed
a
with
professor or something, right?
I have heard it a couple other times since then, but that was
Yeah.
the first time that I'd read it as
And
well.
that was like one of the most true things that I had never heard before in my whole life. And I was like, yeah, of course.
Yeah.
Also, what is abled is a bit of that, but like even say we just use the definition of my brain thinks I'm abled, like my self-identity is abled. There
Mhm.
will come a point where that self-identity changes. And that might change at different thresholds for different people. Like, oh no, I can't um play Olympic something. I'm less like I am no longer able, right? Like people could have different definitions,
Yes. Yeah, it's true.
you know, but it's
Yeah.
all temporary.
No matter like the what we can do will change over time.
Yeah. Mm.
No matter what. Yeah.
So do you have like your personal sort of barometer for success or worthiness that whether, you know, after your time practicing clinical medicine or just at the end of your week, like how are you measuring that differently for yourself now?
Oh my gosh, Joan, it's like you're reading my mind. So like that's been such a big question for me in my mind lately too, is like what does success mean?
Yeah.
And I've had people say to me like we want you to talk to our group so that you can like it'll help people to see that you can still be successful when
Mm,
you are living with a like disability. And again, I don't even know, like I'm not I have a hard time. I'm not sure if I define myself as having a disability. Like I'm working
yeah.
through this too. But with that I'm like, what is successful? So like I definitely have, there's the shame piece around like it doesn't feel successful to not be able to manage a family practice. Like that doesn't fit with my definition of success. And so I've had to, work on that and be like, there's lots of different ways to be a successful family doctor. But then the step back is like, who defines success, and like is success the goal that I'm going for?
Right.
Is it tied up with finances? Is it tied up with productivity? Is it tied up with like, I don't know, how many people I help? Like,
Hmm.
I don't know. So it's a really good question, but that's like such a question that's been on my mind too. And maybe actually, and then I've been saying like maybe maybe that's not actually the question I should be thinking about. Like
Mm.
maybe it's something else.
Yeah. This is like I if if this was just like you and I having a conversation, I would definitely just be Googling the etymology of success. It's like one of my favorite things of being like, what literally does success even mean? Is there a definition of success that feels resonant? You know, I wonder, like, all like for myself, yeah, for me, success is too laden with external expectation because there's
Yeah.
too many external definitions of success. And it feels too out there and prizes and who wins the trophy or whatever, you know? So worthiness is another word, or I love it, like I love process metrics versus outcome metrics in the sense of like, so I count my day as successful if I practiced, if I had intention to do something versus whatever the outcome was. And for me, that's been an interesting shift and has led to many beautiful, cool outcomes. But that doesn't have to be so, just so you know, my where I am at in answering that question. That's where I'm at these days.
I like that. That's interesting. So, sort of looking at the end of the day, did I go into that? I mean, some of that, when I think of it, parenting,
Mm,
so some of, that's actually a good frame for me because I really worked on that when my daughter had a several year phase of just lots of really big emotions. And my success would be like, did I did I carry myself well? Do I feel good about the way I spoke to her during that? And like it regardless of like the meltdown what it was, but like can I walk away from that being like, oh, I feel okay about what I said and how I showed up. And then I would feel like that was sort of my success. So I actually like that frame on that. And maybe in family medicine, like that part of it too is, there's like a system right now that's really challenging. So
mhm.
success as a family doctor is not necessarily going to be that you see everybody on time and you see everybody that needs to be seen and you are, your inbox is cleaned up and like it's got to be maybe something else around like I feel like I had a couple interactions where I connected with my patients.
Yep,
And
that's it.
yeah, so maybe a more micro. I think maybe I'm like maybe getting to like macro on success and maybe a more like a micro, those small
Yeah,
wins.
I love it. Well, I mean, I'm biased because that's how I do it, but I think
Yeah,
you're on the right path.
yeah, I like that.
And at least because then you don't have to beat yourself up for whatever bit. It doesn't mean you can't have cool ideas of what could come in the future, but it's the day to day that gets you there anyway. You know what I mean? So
Yeah.
if you feel good about that,
And I think you're right too. It's like a more like it's what can I control versus I think that other idea of success that I was thinking of is like how am I perceived? Like will I be
yes,
perceived as successful? And it's like I can't control that.
nope.
But how, what are the like little things I can do that feel good and
Yeah, I think actually that is the main thing, isn't it? Because all of it, like even it's like achieve like earning a certain amount of money or whatever, seeing a certain number of people, like there's just all none of that's under our direct control. We have our part within if we wanted to achieve some external success, right? But like,
Mm,
you know, the silver medalist in the Olympic, you know how they say that they get
yeah,
really depressed? It's that whole thing, you know. So
yeah,
if you define it by this thing, and if you're second best in the whole dang world,
yeah.
it's good to have your own internal metrics. So you're not so sad that you got second place out of all the humans in a sport, you know?
Well, and again, I'm thankful. Like I'm not in this environment, but I think there is this like that in a publish or perish. Like I'm not in that
Oh,
at all,
yes.
but I'm so glad not to be because it sounds like that would be a hard, there's these like defined metrics of success, and
Mm,
I'm happy not to have that.
me too. And so both our hearts go out to anyone listening who does find
Hey,
themselves in those spaces. And how you doing? Are you okay?
how are you
Like
doing?
it's not you. You're not an imposter. No one's
Yeah,
doing well. No one's even the person who thinks they're crushing it, they
yeah,
might have an internal struggle.
yeah,
Truly.
yeah. Like because 100 papers might just not feel like enough. Like you might, if, and that's the other big question. Like, what's enough?
Yes.
What is enough? What is enough for me to contribute?
Yes.
I don't know.
Oh my gosh. That like there's this journal. I'm forgetting the name of it. It's by Sonia Renee Taylor and Adrienne Marie Brown. It's like Journal of Radical Permission. Maybe that's it. It might not be quite that. But one of the questions in it was like, am I satisfiable? How satisfiable am I? We're just
Yes.
speaking of enoughness. And I
Yeah.
went, oh, something to practice, right? It's not like a binary
Yes.
personality type, but it's like, can I grow my capacity to be satisfied?
Yes.
Otherwise, I will never think something's enough because, at least to me, those are the same idea.
Yes, I totally agree. And
Yeah.
that's something I've done a lot of work at too.
Mm, that's awesome. How's that work gone for you? How's that looking?
I think it's like it's a work in progress.
Mhm.
It's the, like the voice that's there when I see like leadership opportunities come up, or, it's the voice that like jumps to wanting to say yes. And then it's the like, wait a second,
Mm,
um, do I have capacity for this? Um, would it be okay if I am just doing what I'm doing? Like it, who who would who would see me differently?
yeah.
And it always ends up like when you look at that in the end, like I sometimes, I have these ideas of like kind of like you were saying before, like the shadowy people. It's not even though it's like who are the people that I think will be thinking more of me if I do this? Well, they're kind of amorphous. Like actually the people that I care about
Yeah.
probably would prefer if I'm better rested and
Yes.
have more time for them. Like they probably don't really want me to do those other things. So
Oh my gosh, that's so good. So true. Whose opinion are you even interested in, right?
yeah. And it's really like but I don't know. It's still it is work.
Mm. So, as we draw this conversation to a close, I love to end with, yeah, just any parting like words or advice. So, speaking to all of us temporarily abled humans in healthcare, and maybe even more specifically, someone who is realizing that some amount of their abilities is shifting and they're struggling with that, what would you want to say to them? What would you want them to hear from you?
Oh, that's a good question. I would say so this is like what I would love to, I like say to myself too is and it's practice, but like, yeah, really, your worth is not tied to your productivity. You're a worthy human being, regardless of how many patients you see in a day, or whether you see patients in a day, or you know whether you can practice medicine at all. Like I think we really need to stay in touch with that fact that we are. And again, I'm saying this to myself too, but
Yes.
like, we are worthy human beings, um, beyond our role as physicians, and that's okay.
Yeah.
And also, you're not alone. If there's somebody listening who's having these challenges, like it's pretty quiet. I don't think we don't talk about this very much in medicine, but there's actually a lot of people who are struggling with bodies that put limits on them. Um,
Yeah.
so you're not alone. And what else? In terms of this idea of success, I think I really am going to keep practicing this frame of, you know, not using that external lens of success and really like looking more for those small, pieces that feel right. So,
Mm.
yeah, I really think those are good questions.
Mm. Thank you. Yeah. I needed to hear all of that too. That's just so nourishing to hear. And it's so, because we do feel alone. That's like one of the worst parts of the shaminess of it all, right? And so I'm so grateful that you were brave, you dared greatly, as our patron saint Brene
Yes,
Brown would say, and came on and shared your story. I just think it's going to resonate so much, and I'm grateful to know you. So thanks for reaching out, and I'm so happy that we've gotten to connect this year.
me too. I really have loved our conversations, and I hope that we continue to have many more.
Yeah, me too. All right. And so for everyone listening, yeah, whatever state your body is in and how able or unable you feel to meet the tasks of the day, just remember that you are worthy no matter what. And I'll talk to you next week.